Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being with us for our press conference presenting our 2022 business result. The background, we're still having this war in Ukraine, the war between Ukraine and Russia, and our country is engaged to protect the neighboring countries of Ukraine, and we are supporting our Air Force that is deploying aircraft locally in those countries. The French military programming law is important. It will cover 2024-2030. It was announced by the head of state, and we are waiting for the adaptations in the coming weeks. The 2023 budget was already decided upon, and this military programming law will begin in 2024. The COVID pandemic, the issues related to the shortages because of the war in Ukraine, this created a lot of constraints in our logistics, supply chain, and our supply chain is in great difficulty. It's true for us and for the aircraft manufacturers, especially at this time where there is a ramp up of our profession, whether it's us, Dassault, or our friends from business jets. And it is difficult for our subcontractors, and it requires particular attention at all moments, not to mention the increase in the prices of energy, and the smallest of our providers can have some difficulties, but the backlog is full, so the morale is good. A lot of fragility regarding the increase in the pace. The orders are there everywhere, but the ramp-up is a bit delicate. There's an energy transition too, as you've seen it in the film. We are involved in large research programs. I'll tell you more about this later on. And there are laws in France, the climate and resilience law in France, or the directives from the EU. 2022 will be a record year in terms of order intakes, especially the contract with UAE, 80 Rafales, and also a very good year for the Falcons with 64 Falcons, and the Russian aircraft, because we're following the embargo on all the Russian products. We're not selling anymore to the Russians, and we've canceled the aircraft that we had in our order intakes. So the 64 should have been slightly above. So the number of order intakes is 21 billion of euros. Revenue, 6.9 billion of euros. That is the delivery of 46 aircraft, and 13 Rafale export plus 1 Rafale France. So considering the guidance, we have delivered 14 Rafales. And I'll get back to this. 32 Falcons were delivered, slightly under our forecast, which was at 35. So the backlog, historical, 35 billion, 251 planes, 125 Rafale export, 39 Rafale France, and 87 Falcons. At the end of 2022, after many discussions and negotiations, we received the awarding of the Phase 1B of the FCAS with NGFs. The activity and programs, and I'm going to go back to the UAE, which is our major Rafale contract. There was an additional tranche of 6 Rafales for Greece, and the first tranche out of the 42 Indonesian aircraft that has been signed, the first tranche that was enforced of 6 Rafales. We are waiting for the entry of the 36 Rafales. There'll be 2 phases of 18 each this year. We are pursuing prospection. The success of the Rafale doesn't need to be demonstrated anymore, and it's generating a lot of questions and interest all around the world, particularly in India, where we have sold, and in other countries, have you seen, like Colombia, and there are a certain number of other countries. We've delivered 13 export Rafales. That's the end of India, Qatar, the first contracts signed, the 36 for India, the 36 for Qatar, and we've begun delivering aircraft to Greece. the delivery of one Rafale to France after many years with 0 Rafale. I'd like to specify this once again. I say it each and every time here, if we did not deliver any Rafales to France, it isn't because we favored export, France asked us to do so for budgetary reasons. We're pursuing our developments. The F4 standard, that was one of the first milestones, and an F4 aircraft is being experimented at the Air Force and delivered by the DGA. In 2023, we're expecting the 5th tranche, so the 30 aircraft that were planned since a long time, plus 12 replacement aircraft from Croatia, the 12 Greek ones having been replaced and the order having been placed 2 years ago. The President of the Republic announced his intention to upgrade all Rafales in the coming years, and so gradually we will give up the Mirage 2000 for the Air Force. Support to our military fleets. This is important with the war in Ukraine. There are verticalized contracts for all the fleets. The Rafale with the Ravel Ocean for Atlantic 2 and Balzac for the verticalized contracts for the Mirage 2000. We're discussing today verticalization contracts for the Air Force, French Air Force Alpha jets. Exports, we've deployed our teams to set up our support to the aircraft that have been delivered, and this required a reinforcement of these teams and support. Croatia is not mentioned in our new aircraft because these are French aircraft, and we're beginning to deliver the aircraft for Croatia, which come from the French Air Force, and we've begun the training with the French Air Force, and we're beginning this launching of the Rafale in Croatia. The Future Combat Air System, as explained in the film, this was made concrete after the end of Phase A in 2022. We had to wait for the end of 2022 to go on to the next step, which is Phase 1B. These are detailed studies on the definition of demonstrator. As far as we're concerned, the aircraft demonstrator of the NGF in partnership with Airbus and Indra in Spain. These are the 3 leaders for these countries. And under our leadership, our architects, this contract will begin officially in the coming weeks with the setting up of teams here in Saint-Cloud. We're taking part in the other pillars, which are the remote carriers or the system-to-system pillars. And we have the item 0, which is a very strange name, but this is the continuation of the technical studies where the military are also part of all this. And we have the GCS phase that had been completed in 2022, and we're resuming this to improve the operational concepts. And we have the Pillar 8. Pillar 8, these are the means that will allow our teams from the different countries and the different companies to work together with the Dassault System 3D Experience base platform, which will allow us to determine these future aircraft with the same definition, production platforms, and support platforms. The Eurodrone, the chief contractor, prime contractor is Airbus. We are one favored contractor. We prepared the flight controls, the communication and data liaison systems with Taris. The mission aircraft, we're pursuing the development of our mission aircraft, the Maritime Surveillance Falcons for France, and they will be delivered during the PLM, the Falcon 2000. There are 5 that are contractualized, 7, and there'll be an option of 5 more that will be activated in the coming years. Archange based on Falcon 8X, which is pursuing its development. Atlantic 2, that was upgraded, the retrofit of the former ATL2 to go onto this new system. This is underway, and we have received the 6th aircraft. The 7th one will arrive in the coming weeks. We have provided the future PATMAR, and the DGA has sent a call for information to two companies, Dassault on the one hand. We will prepare Falcon 10X for maritime patrolling, and this is all our experience since 1958 on maritime patrolling. And Airbus will certainly propose its derived commercial aircraft. For export, we have delivered the last Falcon, that's the 6th one. So now there are 6 Japan Coast Guard's Falcons, which are operational for the Japanese Coast Guards, and we have taken orders for 4 aircraft for South Korea, and these aircraft are electronic war aircraft. We're going to deliver 4 green, and the Koreans will do the work in Korea. The Falcon context, the number of orders received was good because the 64 orders, that is net of the cancelled Russian orders at the end of 2022. So therefore up compared to 2021, which was different compared to the previous COVID years, so 32 deliveries. There are difficulties in the supply chain and the end of the COVID. This did not help us to deliver more, so we are ramping up. The market was very active in 2022. As you know, the end of 2022 was more complex because there were a lot of fears of a recession, and the beginning of years always calmer, so it's slightly less active than last year. And today we hope that all this is going to resume because now the recession is behind us. I hope so. But forecasts are difficult to make in this world because everybody was saying that there would be a recession, and finally there's no recession. We will see what will happen in 2023. The pre-owned market is difficult. It's very difficult to find pre-owned markets, and the stocks of Falcons to be sold in the world have drastically fallen. We're pursuing the enrichment of the range with the development of the 6X and the 10X with a priority which is given to the 6X, which will enter into service in mid-2023. But we first have to go through the end of certification and obtain the certification. The last days, the last weeks are the most touchy ones because there's still a lot of work, and the agencies are very meticulous because of the aeronautical environment we've had in the past few years. Continuous improvement of the aircraft in service. We are trying to improve our Falcons, for example, by changing the avionics in the 7X and the 8X. We will pursue this in the entire range, and we will improve the completion in all our aircraft. Now, aviation bashing, we cannot avoid this. The whole aviation sector is attacked by a certain number of NGOs and organizations. This has been criticized for the last 4 years. This is just to recall that aviation in general, it's 2% of the CO2 emissions in the world, that business aviation in general, the entire business aviation is 2%, so 0.04% of global CO2 emissions, and the Falcon fleet, which is made up of 2,100 Falcon flying in the world, that is a little less than 10% of business aviation. So if you count the zeros, if you add an additional zero after the point, you will have 0.04% of emissions. That doesn't mean that we have to remain idle. Since 2009, We want to reach net zero, which was recalled by the International Organization for the Standardization of Aviation by 2050. In order to do so, what is important are the SAFs, but I'll talk about this later on. So 1 year of flight of Falcons, that's the equivalent of 24 hours of global flows of video streaming. And that is just to give you an idea, it's 5 years of global truck traffic, or 2.5 days of operation of German thermal plants. So if we really want to fight against the CO2 emissions to help the climate, we have to look at the whole world. We have to address that, and we have our share. We're engaged in the CORAC Clean Sky programs, and we have alternative fuels. We have 50% of alternative fuels, kerosene mixes. Today we have blends at 30% in France with biofuels today, and we're working for the future. We're going to increase this capacity, and we're going to make sure that there are developments of new alternative fuels, and especially e-fuels, and they could be CO2 means of sequestering CO2. So we're spending money, and we're receiving help from the public authorities. As for the eco-responsibility, I'm pursuing along these lines. The 10X will be on 100% of alternative fuels, will be fully decarbonized. So long as we find fuels, we have to develop these alternative fuels and distribute them. I'm quite confident because when I go to the United States, I find American companies that are engaged, that have incentives to do so. You know that in the United States, this momentum is generated by these incentives. In Europe, it's the bans, the laws, and the Americans will decarbonize before us, because it's not by banning that we'll be able to progress. And the objective is to encourage us to do so, because we have the will to do so. So I'm confident that the United States will develop these new technologies and will develop alternative technologies. And in the automotive sector, they're going quite fast. Just to give you a figure, they've given an objective of 50-50 between the traditional thermal engines for cars and the electric motors, and it's going very fast. We are banning thermal engines by 2035, and countries are realizing that this is silly. Italy and Germany are saying that this is silly to ban thermal engines by 2035. I'm closing this digression. This has nothing to do with the Dassault results for this year, but it gives you an idea. So we are engaged in this decarbonization. We are engaged with the ICAO. Once again, I'm repeating, if we want to save the planet, it's got to be done globally. It's not just in France. It's not just Europe. It's got to be done in the whole world. And at the ICAO, we have the Chinese, the Indians, the USA, some number of European countries, and those who issue a lot of CO2. And together we'll find the right way of doing things at the ICAO. The Falcon range, you have the whole range, the Falcon 2000, the 10X, the 6X, that will enter and will enrich the range. 4,000 nautical miles up to 7,500 nautical miles for this range. The Falcon 6X, as I've already said, we have a lot of flight hours. We have a lot of experience. Therefore, we've gone around the world to be capable of understanding the maturity of the aircraft and look at the small faults. But it's brand new, and we're correcting all this before the commissioning. So this world tour lasted 4 weeks with 50 stops, and this was very enriching for our ability to reach full maturity when it will enter into service. production ramp up. It's not very easy in the current situation, but a certain number of aircraft are already fully kitted, and this was shown in the trade shows at the eBay's, NBA in Orlando, and the first aircraft are being fitted in Little Rock because the aircraft have been sold since some time now, and now we have to ramp up this production. The 6X cabin is regularly awarded. In 2022, we received another award. It's a beautiful cabin, and for those who will look at these trade shows, trade fairs, you will have a visit, and it's wonderful. The 10X will be more spacious, even better. It's like a flying flat, and those who are traveling for a long time and for long hauls, they will feel at home in the aircraft. They can keep working, they can take rest, and erase the flying hours. The 10X is pursuing its development, and we are closely watching the development of the engines. Rolls-Royce for the 10X, which is in Germany because it's Rolls-Royce Germany for the design and manufacturing. And we have permanent teams that are following the development of this engine, which is slightly different from the one equipping the Gulfstream. So the development is ensured for other aircraft too. Falcon support, we've already talked about this in the previous years. This global network is very important for us. We can have a footprint around the world to support our clients who themselves fly all around the world. And in 2022, early 2023, we've opened a maintenance hub in Dubai. In 2024, we will open, this was launched in 2022, we'll open a new center in the east of the United States in Florida because we've closed down Wilmington in the east of the United States because the facilities were becoming a bit obsolete. It was easier to change places and to fully rebuild something that will prepare for the arrival of new aircraft like the 6X. And this is underway, and we've opened a new center in Kuala Lumpur. And I'm saying it, we have recuperated the maintenance of the state aircraft that we will do at Villacoublay, and we have an MCO for 7 years for this French governmental aircraft, and they weren't with us until 2022. CSR, we talked about this. We can talk a lot about this for those who are patient enough. In the management reports that will be at your disposal, you have some 50 pages explaining what all we're doing in terms of CSR. We are engaged, it's our will. We're engaged by the laws, by the European directives. It's very burdensome. You have to change the material for REACH. There are new standards, and this forces us in our profession to re-qualify a certain number of things. So it is very burdensome development, and it is disturbing our supply chains too. We're doing the work for a certain number of things. I talked about energy sobriety, and all this is keeping our teams busy. Human resources, the company is hiring more people. We've received a lot of new orders, so we've hired a lot of new people. A lot of people are retiring, not at the age of 62, later than that. And we've hired a lot of people. At Dassault, we can hire people. The conditions are good, unlike what some people might think. And we are putting particularly efforts to hire women in 2022. So 24% of new women hired. We're at 19% for men, women at Dassault. It's progressing. It's not easy because the entire industry has trouble finding women engaging themselves in this industry. It's true in the schools, in the engineering schools or the apprentice schools. The ratio is not good, and we need to make efforts with all our different branches upstream in the education, the attractiveness of this job, industrial job. the industry is the place where people are paid the best compared to other sectors. So it's good for women to enter into the sector, but they have to be aware of all these scientific jobs as early as possible. Sharing values, we've talked a lot about this. I'd like to thank the agreement signed with the trade unions, with the MEDEF, also the MEDEF negotiator and the general director of EMM. And thanks to this agreement, we respected the small ones and profit sharing and participation. At Dassault, we are upstream from all these discussions, and thanks to the Dassault spirit, we're contributing. There's a lot of value sharing. This year, 210 million euros of employee profit sharing and incentives will be paid to the employees. And this is roughly 4 months of additional salaries for 93% of the employees. So the higher paid employees will get a little less. We add 4 million euros in value sharing bonuses that I decided at the end of 2022, a 500 euro bonus that will be paid to all those that receive less than 3 minimum salaries to help the smallest salaries that are affected by inflation, especially for the first necessity products. And I haven't put this here, but you have the UAE bonus that was paid. And you see, it's not too far from what we also share with our shareholders. So it is well shared. The transformation plan, this is being pursued. We're modernizing our plants, all our infrastructure. You've seen it in our film. We did it last year. We inaugurated in Mérignac, in Seclin, where we closed between the two buildings. And we're preparing Cergy, which will replace Argenteuil. And we are pursuing the digital modernization with the 3D experience of Dassault Systèmes, which will apply to the 10X, which will apply to the NGF, and we will generalize that for our other aircraft, as well as for the completion in Little Rock.
Now, the actual order intake, 21 billion euros, thanks to the 64 Falcon and 92 Rafale, so it's up compared with 2021. 6.9 billion for the net sales. We've delivered fewer Rafales than in 2021, 14 versus 25. The consolidated backlog, 35 billion euros, much higher than the 21 billion in 2021, with a breakdown which is mainly towards exports because of the Rafales. It's still high for France, but as I said, you can have in your backlog a certain number of Rafales. If you never deliver them, then it does have an impact. It's the case of 42 with the 28 aircraft which remained in the logs for a long time. But we're going to start the second phase of the 40 delivery. Falcons are smaller in the share of the backlog, but there is a high turnover. R&D is self-financed, and it was higher in 2022 than in 2021 because of the 10X. R&D at Dassault is twice of what we do. So we self-finance 50% of our R&D. Thales has reported its business results yesterday. They're also performing very well. We are enjoying, therefore, this high and good result, and this is also part of our net result. So, net sales 6.9 billion euros, an operating margin of 8.3%, an operating income at 572 million, so that's up 1% versus last year. Financial income, 11 million. It's positive as opposed to last year. The financial management has made sure that our cash was not losing money. That's unfortunately due to the higher interest rates. Thales, 394 million euros. That's the contribution of our shares in Thales. Taxes minus 147, so net income 830 with a 12% margin. The R&D 8.3%. Of course, it all depends on the sales, but it's also up compared with last year. So earnings per share will be 10 euros. The cash is also on the rise because of our exports with down payments from our clients, 9.5 billion euros, allowing us to manufacture the aircraft with a free cash flow of 4.9 billion euros. And for those of you who do not do the math, it helps to have a 3.8 billion euro of cash that we directly own. The distribution of capital and voting rights. We've had a share buyback program, and that's for the changes, and it will be approved at the next shareholders' general meeting. So the proposed dividend of 3 euros per share, slightly better than last year, which will be paid out 249 million euros. I was talking about 210 million euros of profit sharing for the employees, plus the value sharing bonuses. And compared with the legal obligations, which would be 38 million euros. And we're far above these 38 million euros. So it's rather close to what we pay as a whole in terms of dividend. Now, future outlooks and strategy, we need first and foremost to secure the supply chain. It's a daily concern for our teams to detect the challenges, be they financial challenges or manufacturing or human resources. We have great difficulties in recruiting in the supply chain. It's even more difficult than within our teams. Now, in GFAS, we also try to improve and secure the supply chain, but it's in the international supply chain, not only in France. For the Rafale, we have to perform our current contracts and secure the Tranche 5 order for 42 aircrafts while continuing our business development for Rafale. Military developments, we want to continue the programs underway and prepare the future standards of Rafale, which will also be exported. So that's the F4 standard. We're also preparing the F5 standard after 2030 for the French military. Support and availability of military aircrafts. We want to continue and meet our commitments to be close to the armed forces staff and their needs. That's 95%. When we have a virtualization contract, it's close to 90%. Falcon, we need to obtain the 6X certification to start its service and keep on developing the Falcon 10X and keep up with our sales effort. Support and availability of civilian aircraft. I'd like to remind that it's always difficult because unlike what you might think for commercial aircrafts with large airports, big airliners, we support and maintain one aircraft at a time. And that's true worldwide. So it means that we have to be present sometimes in very small airport at the other end of the world. So it's a very particular type of service that needs to be improved. Therefore, we have to have an after-sale network for spare parts and for all the services that we aim to improve. Energy transition, I've already described it. Make in India. We continue ramping up in spite of the challenges you've seen in the video. You see the front part of the Falcon 2000 made in India for all our Falcons. So that's a ramping up that's important. And India is becoming a country where the aeronautic industry is getting prepared for the future. And that's not only true for Dassault. So NGF and FCAS, we've launched the phase 1B of the demonstrator. And the heart of the development will be done here in Saint-Cloud with some of our partners. Guidance, delivery of 15 Rafale and next year as per our contract, and 35 Falcons. And it'll depend on the entry into service of the SEC6. We are expecting a decrease in our net sales. In spite of the Rafales, where the backlog is not the same scope as the exports, because we do not sell the radar and the engine in France, while on export market we sell the whole set. So that was for my introduction, and I'm ready to answer your questions.